Moving on to 1.4, we're going to talk about rounding, estimation, and order. Okay, so when you're rounding, sometimes you're asked to round something to the nearest certain place value. Here, we're being asked to round 37 to the nearest 10. And there's all sorts of applications where this is really important. Sometimes you want to round just so it's easier to do the math, to add or subtract something. It's easier to deal with rounded numbers. This also has implications in science where you can't record numbers that you haven't really measured. So the rounding becomes important there as well. Okay, so 37, if we look at that on a number line, here we're going from 30 to 40 on this number line, you can see 37 is closer to the 40 than it is to the 30, right? We'd have to go 7 jumps over to get from 30 to 37, but we only have to go 3 jumps over to get from 37 to the 40. So to round this to the nearest 10 then, well, the nearest 10 is the 40. So we could use this symbol here. That means approximately equal. So 37 is approximately equal to 40, or it's pretty close to 40. The process for rounding whole numbers is really to look at the digit to the right. So the first thing you're going to do is identify where you're supposed to round to. Here, when we were looking at 37, we were told to round to the nearest 10. So that's this place value here. So that's step 1, identify where you want to round to. Step 2 is you want to look at the digit to the right of that place value. Okay, if that digit is 5 or more, then you're going to round it up. Okay, if it's 5 or more, let it soar. Okay, if that number is 5, it's sort of halfway in between, but we always round up in that case. If the number is greater than 5, it's going to be closer to the nearest, to the 10 that's, I lost my words. If it's greater than 5, it's going to be closer to the higher 10, right? To the higher number. So here, that's why you would round this to 40. Okay, approximately equal, I should say. Approximately equal to 40. Okay, let's do some practice. I should say if the number's 4 or less, then the number is going to be closer to the lower of the, in this case, 10s. In this case, it would be 30, right? So for example, if you had 33, that's closer to the 30. So we're rounding to the nearest 10. We look at the digit to the right. Here, that is 4 or less, so let it rest. In other words, your 10's position stays as the 3, so it becomes 30. Okay, so if we have 847 and we want to round to the nearest 10, well, let's start by underlining that position. So the 10's position is here at the 4. That means we want to look at the position to the right, so at that 7. Okay, 7 is 5 or more. So let it soar. In other words, that 10's position is going up. We're going to round up to 850. Okay, let's do another. So we've got 3,482, and we want to round to the nearest 100. So let's underline the hundreds position. We're going to look at the digit to the right of that position. So here it's an 8. That means we're rounding up. So this is going to become, so now our position we underlined, we're going to round up. So this becomes 3,500. Go ahead and pause the video and try those next two on your own. Okay, so hopefully you had a chance to try C and D. Let's try them together. So we've got 5,446, and we want to round this to the nearest 100. So our hundreds position is here. We're going to look to the right. It's 4 or less, so let it rest. In other words, this is going to then become 5,000. Our hundreds are going to stay as they were. So we end up with 5,400. Because if you think of it, 46 is closer to 0 than it would be to 100. Okay, last one. We've got 4,961. And we want to round it to the nearest 100. Okay, here's our hundreds position. This one's a bit trickier. We're going to look to the digit to the right. It's 5 or more, so we know we're going up. So that means the position we underlined, we want to go up 1, but it's already at 9. So that means we're going to have to bring that to 5,000. So we can't go higher than the 9. So basically it's almost like like when you were carrying forward a 10. So we're doing 4,900, and you sort of have to add 1 to that place value there, which means you're ending up with 5,000. Let's do one more that's like that, because those ones are tricky. So I'm going to say do round 197 to the nearest 10. To the nearest 10. So pause the video and see if you can do this one. Okay, and let's try this together. So we've got 197. We're rounding to the nearest 10. Okay, so we're going to look at the position to the right of that 10. It's a 7, so that means it's 5 or more. Let it soar. So our 9 has to go up 1. So 9 can only go to 10, which means we're going to carry that 1 over to the hundreds position to end up with 200. All right, let's turn to inequalities. So far we've talked about equal signs. Okay, so 5 plus 3 equals 8. That means those two things mean the same thing. There's also this you might have seen in previous math classes where you put a slash through the equal sign. That means it's not equal. Okay, 5 is not equal to 3. But we also have these symbols over here, which is what we call inequalities. Okay, we've got a greater than in blue there. Okay, greater than. If you see the greater than with a line under it, like you do right here, okay, that means greater than or equal to. Okay, it's kind of like half of that equal sign you saw before, because it could be equal to or it could be greater than. The less than symbols are shown in red, so we've got a less than right here, and then we've got a less than or equal to. The way I remember these is quite boring, but it works for me. Less than starts with an L, and it points to the left. Points to left. So that kind of helps me to read them as words. Points to, oops, I can't talk and write. Points to left. Okay. The other way a lot of people like to do these is to think of two ways. Either you're pointing to the smaller number. So let's look at that example A there. So we've got a 35 and a 25, and we want to use either a less than or greater than to complete the statement. Well, we could point to the smaller number like this. And that's also the equally kind of boring way I learned it. However, most of my students like to think of it as this symbol is eating the larger number. So you have an alligator here. This is about the extent of my art, by the way. So sorry. That's why I do math. So we're eating that larger number. So whichever way works for you. You can eat the larger number or point to the smaller number. Okay, so next example then. So we've got a 0 and a 4. We want an inequality statement that would be true. So if we want to figure out an inequality statement that would be true, we can eat the larger number here. And you would read that then as 0 is less than 4. Go ahead and try those next two on your own. Click pause. All right, so we've got 12 and 18. So if we point to the larger number or 8, that 18, we would read that as 12 is less than 18. And last one, we want to eat the 1,000 here because it's the bigger number. So we've got 1,000 is greater than 100.